the best food in the world? Well, here's the best Italian, here's the best Greek, you know. And so with music, it's also very subjective. Well, what one guy loves, another guy doesn't like, you know. But it's nice to be considered to be great. But I think like I have an enormous collection of music and CDs, and I like all kinds of music, and I like all kinds of drummers. And again, you know, it's people can be. It's like who's the greatest doctor in the world? Well, who's the greatest neurosurgeon? Who's the greatest podiatrist? Who's the greatest? There's different fields and different things. There's lots of people that are great. But so to me, just art is always like more subjective than like things that have a finite number, like sports. Like it's obvious, you know, who wins the Super Bowl is the guy who scores the team who scores the most points. So they're considered the best. But our thing is it's how do you gauge something that people feel in their soul? You know, certain music just touches me so deeply. There are certain people or drummers that have played, they play so beautifully that literally I'll cry, and not because it's so emotional that it hits me so deep. I have like no other emotion left. I can't say anything. There are no words, and it's just like tears of this inexplicable joy that comes out because it makes me feel like incredible, you know. And so that's what the power of music is. Is the power of music goes beyond words. Where words leave off, music hits the deeper recesses of the soul.
Well, I would say let's get started now, but Zoro's already started.
Dude, I'm always starting. I'm never not starting. So just hit record. I'm always on.
Hey, so wanted to welcome you students and volunteers from worship. So cool to have you guys here. This whole idea of the masterclass thing started as a way to take what you students did for the recital and kind of keep the momentum going, keep you guys inspired and kind of practicing by talking to some of our great worship leaders and musicians that we have and artists across all campuses at Bayside. So want to welcome you guys again. And if you don't know who Zoro is, just briefly, you know, Zoro's been considered one of the top drummers in the world, as you said, Ryan. He won Best R&B Drummer in the world's top drum magazine, Modern Drummer, for several years in a row, if I'm not mistaken. He's played with the who's who of artists, including Lenny Kravitz, Frankie Valli and the Four Seasons, Philip Bailey of Earth, Wind, and Fire. I didn't know that. That's awesome. Bobby Brown, John Lennon's son, Sean Lennon. That's awesome. And Elvis Presley's wife, Lisa Marie Presley, or his daughter, right? Lisa Marie Presley. And currently with Lincoln Brewster touring, before COVID hit, was touring with Lincoln Brewster, and currently is a pastor of young married couples at Adventure Campus. So welcome everybody, Zoro the Drummer. Hey.
Everybody, thanks for joining us on the Zoom call. So fun to see your faces. How's everybody this morning?
Great. Doing great.
Lucas, how are you, pal? I can see your names. Someone's Alexis. I don't know who. There's two people there. I know Mark. Hey, Mark. Seth.
Hey.
I see Devin there with a guitar behind him or a bass. And Ryan. Well, let's get started. What would you like me to start with, Brandon?
Yeah, so as you can tell, we don't need to prompt Zoro very much to talk. He'll just go for it. But what I thought we might start with is all you students and volunteers, you guys have somebody that's a champion in your corner that's encouraging you, whether it's your parents or your significant other that's kind of coming alongside you and helping you and providing the means for you to kind of explore your artwork and stuff like that. So I wanted Zoro to start with that because he had a pretty challenging upbringing, but he had one champion other than God in his corner that really helped him reach the heights that he reached.
Well, first of all, nobody in this life makes it on their own, and anybody who I know who has succeeded at anything, there's always people behind them. No matter who they are, they might say, "Oh, I did it all myself." There's no such thing. Everyone who's ever spoken a kind word or helped you has woven themselves into the tapestry of your life. And if you are fortunate to have either a parent, a foster parent, a husband, a wife, somebody who is supportive of you, then consider yourself among the lucky. And I was fortunate, although I had a very difficult upbringing. I was raised by a single immigrant mother from Mexico, 7 brothers and sisters, and we struggled to survive day to day, and to the point where we even lived in our car for a period of time. But none of that stopped my mother from planting a dream in my heart when I was very young, and she always told me I was set apart to do great things, and kind of almost spoke a prophetic word over my life, and said, you're gonna do great things, and God sets you apart for great stuff. So she was saying that at a time when nothing looked like that was even a remote possibility. And that's what faith is. So, and my mother loved music and was a very, very passionate, soulful woman. And I'm very much like a reflection of her in many ways. I have her. She had this incredible joy, and she had this zeal and lust for life. So I got a lot of that from her. And but so if any of you have people like that behind you, those are the people you're like. To me, whenever I found somebody who championed me or believed in me, like my mother, and then be like my first drum teacher, or people who would say, "Hey, you got some talent there." My goal was to always honor them by being excellent, by succeeding, by showing them that the investment you made in me through word or deed, look, I turned it into something, because I was always grateful for anybody that helped me along the way. And there were many different people at different times that helped me. In fact, I am still friends to this day with like my first drum teacher, and he's about 10 years older than me, and I've kept them in my life. Anybody who's ever helped me, I've kept them in my life. If you ever look at one of my books, you'll see my acknowledgments in the front of the book. I have the longest list of acknowledgments in any books I've ever seen. Like, I've never seen anybody who has as many people, uh, because those are the everybody who's helped me. I want As I succeeded in my life, I wanted them to be a part of my success. I wanted them to know that, hey, I couldn't have done this without you, without your kind words, without what you taught me or what you showed me, or without your prayers or whatever. So I include everybody in the journey, but nobody makes it alone. The first thing is that everybody on here, God has given us a free gift. God has given us a talent. And for most everybody on here, it's some sort of a musical talent. Now, I recognized at a very early age I had this gift of rhythm, but I never gave myself the talent, and neither did you. So God is the giver of the gift, okay? But He gives all of us this gift in the form of a seed, and a seed has this incredible potential to be something, but it has to be planted, it has to be nurtured, it has to be protected, it has to grow. The seed by itself isn't going to do anything. So the seed is this amazing talent. And it's kind of like when you see a tree grow, or people take these things for granted. But when you get some seed packets and you plant some corn or some radishes or some tomatoes, and then whatever, 60 days later, 90 days later, pumpkins take like 90 days, they take all summer, and they grow, and you go, does anybody ever think about, how did this happen? Like, I got this seed, I put it in the ground. We understand the process, but not the miracle part. The miracle is like, we have this talent. If we work on it and develop it, it turns into this magical thing. But we at no point really ever understand the magic. The whole thing is magic. And planting a seed and having it turn into something that you eat, and all you did was abide by the laws of God, which is to put water, to fertilize it, to put soil on it. But you had to do something to turn that seed into fruit. And it's the same thing in our lives with the talents that we have. It comes in the form of a seed. It has a potential to be a giant oak tree. But now that depends on how bad you want to be a giant oak tree. How much are you going to mend that garden? How much are you going to tend to it? How much are you going to fertilize it and make it grow? And so I look at it as my responsibility, accountability to God, that you gave me a potential to be excellent in a specific area. Now it's up to me to turn that little seed into a huge tropical garden where, when I'm at the end of my life or when I meet God face to face, I can say, hey, you gave me 10 seed, or you gave me 4 seed packets. One of them was drumming, one of them was speaking, one of them was teaching, One of them was writing. These are my gifts, you know. Uh, but you gave me four different kinds of fruit. Well, I grew a huge garden, and I've got acres and acres of all these fruits that you gave me, because that is your job, is to multiply what he gave you. Now, nobody gets to choose what he gave us. Nobody gets to choose their talent. God chooses them. You just get to recognize them, and then it's up to you to turn it into something extraordinary. Another way of saying that is WORK, work. Just work, 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 practice, practice, practice. Now, a lot of people avoid work and they avoid practice and they avoid all these things, but it's to their own detriment, because let me tell you something. If you're not constantly working on something and being productive in this life, life is very boring unless you have goals and dreams and things you're pursuing. And that's the problem with a lot of the world, is people get into all kinds of trouble and all kinds of nonsense because they're just not focused on anything. They're bored. Life is boring if you don't have something really hard to attain. Everything that I've ever gone after is super hard or nearly impossible to attain, but that's more the reason to go after it, because then it gives me a reason to wake up every morning. It gives me something like, hey, I want to be better next year than I am this year. And then also, here's the other thing for all of you. Nobody here gets more than 24 hours a day in their life. Every single person is equal in that sense, that we don't get any more than 24 hours a day. So if somebody becomes great at something that you could have been great at, you have the same amount of time that they do. It's just a matter of what you do with that time. And I've learned that in practicing, you could get much further with short increments of time where you're super laser sharp focused. In other words, an
Mm,
hour of really serious practice where you're working on the hardest stuff. I always suggest to you, work on your most difficult things right at the beginning of your practice, and then leave the end of your practice for more sort of noodling and jamming and just having fun, so that you always leave with a sense of joy. If you leave with the most frustrating stuff, then you'll feel like, oh, I suck. I don't want to come back to practice tomorrow. But so start off with your most challenging, difficult practice regime in the beginning, when your mind is sharp, when you're focused, when you're not exhausted, and then really work on that in the beginning. And then, however long your practice session is, everybody practices differently, but I always say, look, if you practice an hour a day, let's say 5 days a week, just go, what do I want to work on each day? So maybe one day, I'll just give you an example, like of myself as a drummer. Like say one day I want to work on my rudiments. So rudiments are like, to another musician, they're like scales. So every instrument, like a guitar has scales, and keyboards and bass, they have scales. These are the foundational principles, right? In drumming, they're called rudiments. They're the patterns you play on the snare that make up drumming. So maybe one day, maybe like Monday, I'll go, for an hour, I'm just going to totally practice my rudiments, and just on a pad or on a snare drum, and really get deep into it. And Tuesday, maybe I'm going to practice for an hour learning one song. Maybe I got to learn a song for Sunday, but I'm going to put a whole hour into just that song to really nail it and really get it happening. Maybe Wednesday, I go, you know what? I'm going to practice my jazz beats, my jazz grooves, real complicated style of music, I might say. I'm just going to work on. So sometimes it's better to go deeper into one thing than just noodling on a bunch of things that you're just kind of haphazardly doing. Because you get better when you sit on something a lot longer. All of a sudden, you'll get a breakthrough somewhere, and oh wow, okay, yeah. But if you only play something for 10 minutes and then you move on to the next thing for 10 minutes, you never get deep in anything. Great writers, great musicians, great actors, they'll really hone something. Like for instance, if and I've known a lot of great actors, and when I see them working on something, you've heard about in interviews, they'll become the character off screen, and so they'll learn this Bostonian accent or this English accent, and they'll really get with a coach and learn how to say it, and then they'll go around talking that way the whole time till they really get it. So the great actors, the great musicians, the great creative people, they've learned how to really dig deep into something and not just do it on the surface level, because that's how you bring the excellence out in something. So pick your hardest stuff, the stuff that you like the least. It could be
mm,
exercises your piano teacher's giving you, it could be scales, it could be chords, it could be whatever. Just, oh man, I hate this stuff. Do that first. and then reward yourself at the end of the practice, like I said, by just having fun. Go out with a bang and play something you just dig playing, and then that'll make you want to come back the next day. So there's lots of different ways to divide up your time. But I find that if you're steady, even the students that I've had, the people that were steady, meaning over the course of a year, I saw them every couple weeks or at least once a month, went much further than people who just took a random lesson here and there, you know. But the people that were just sort of consistent, the key to being excellent at anything is just like a little dripping faucet, just day-to-day consistency. You could apply that to exercise, you could apply that to eating right, you could apply that to music, you could apply it to any sort of craft you do. Just that steady, consistent growth. And then you'll look back in a year and you go, man, I remember when I couldn't even do this. And now all of a sudden, wow, this is becoming second nature to me. Uh, Set yourself goals and challenges that are beyond you right now. Don't just, you know, anybody can be mediocre, and that's what most people are. But why be mediocre when you can be excellent? Set yourself like some really, what almost feels like unattainable musical goals. Like, gosh, I'd like to be able to play this style, or I'd like to be able to learn to play in 7/4 time signature and really like own it, or I'd like to be able to learn this really complicated song that seems right now like impossible. And then always be willing to take the steps to get there. Because the beautiful thing about music, if you think about it, like written music, like reading music, here it is, this system that exists. So anything you play could be written out. So there's this incredibly mathematical system that allows anybody to learn what anybody else has done because the formula is there. It's like math, you know, math is a truth and it's there. And if people learn math, they can become scientists or computer scientists or engineers or whatever. But if that math wasn't in a book where people could pass those truths on to somebody else, it would die with the person who knows it. So the beautiful thing about music is that if you learn to read basic things, I always equate it to like this. There are a lot of great musicians I know who don't read a lick of music and they're still great. But let me tell you what, these people have practiced relentlessly. Relentlessly. They have a natural ear, but they have spent hours and hours and years copying things and making those ears so finely tuned that they're just amazing. But learning how to read even basic music is like this. If you didn't know how to read a book, like just the English language, would you in fact be stupid? No, you wouldn't be stupid because it doesn't change your intellectual ability or level, but it would make you very ignorant and all knowledge would be off limits to you. That means you could not read street signs. You could not read a simple pamphlet. You could not read the instructions on how to open your computer. You would, so what it would do is make many things in life off limits to you. It doesn't change your molecular structure of your brain. You have what you have. It doesn't make you stupid. It makes you not have access to information and access to things that would make you sharper and smarter and open up doors. So I've taught thousands of students in my own life, thousands of drummers, and a good portion of them couldn't read a single note, which is fine. I was not trying to turn them into a master sight reader on a movie score soundtrack where they can read. Like, I just wanted them to understand the mathematics of music so that they can learn some other things apart from me. Because if I have to teach them every single thing, it's that saying, why teach a man how to fish and he can catch fish for himself every day instead of just giving him a fish, right? It's the same thing with music. If I could teach them some basic things to understand how to read out of certain drum books, now they could continue to teach themselves and continue to go further. But if they didn't do that, then they'd have to rely on me to teach them every single thing. And certain things are hard to memorize if you don't understand the math of it. And music is mathematics with a soul. It's numbers. In fact, the whole world is numbers, but it's numbers, with a feeling, right? A certain amount of notes fit in a certain amount of space and a certain amount of time, and they have names and they have divisions and multiplications. So now I'm teaching a student right now who really didn't read any music, and now that he's learning what I'm showing him, it's just opening up a whole world to him. It doesn't change his talent level. He's always had the talent, but it is changing how good of a drummer he's becoming because all of a sudden now he's able to work on things that were harder than he would have ever thought of because he didn't know that they were even possible, right? So take this to the bank. reading music, reading books, or any learning process that you do is going to open up the world of imagination. It's going to open up a world of possibilities. Trying to be a writer, like a novelist, and you haven't read a lot of books, you're not going to be a very good novelist because you have to see how other books are written to go, oh. You have to read 100 different writers to go, this is how many different ways a story can be told.
Yeah.
And then you learn, and the same thing, I have listened to thousands of drummers in my life. Brandon knows, but I have like 15,000 CDs. Now, those might seem archaic, but I have 15,000 CDs, compact discs in my collection. I've had thousands of albums in my life. Back in the old days, cassette tapes. I have thousands of MP3s and bought all kinds of stuff off iTunes. I have an enormous library of music that I listen to all the time. I could not play the way I do today or know what I know without having listened to all that, because all that listening to all that music has shaped me as a musician. Now, the hardest thing about being a musician is what's in between here and what's in between here. What makes you a great musician is what's in between there. And what's in between there is how you think. And how you think is going to come from what you've listened to and what you've exposed yourself to. So when I'm being creative, and playing something, like you guys know him, because he's your local guy, Lincoln Brewster. So I just finished playing on his new album that'll be out like in October or November, whenever he's going to release it. So every idea that I played on that record was coming from the bazillions of bits of information that were fed into my brain over the years. And then I just respond intuitively to what I feel at that moment. So look at your brain as the hard drive. That's the hard drive that God gave you. And the software is whatever you import into the hard drive, into the mainframe. The software is whatever you've read, whatever you've watched, whatever you've listened to, whatever you've studied. All of that is information that's going in there. And then when you play, you can't access information that's not there. If you haven't, for instance, if you were an actor and you're trying to play, let's say you're from LA and you're trying to play a guy with a New York or a Scottish accent. You're playing in some Scottish war movie of the 1200s, like, Braveheart, which you probably never heard of. But anyway, some old Scottish, you're playing some old Scottish guy. Well, you cannot emulate a Scottish accent unless you've heard a Scottish accent. So you can't play a certain groove or style of music that you haven't heard. You can't play what you can't conceive. And you can't conceive it if you haven't imported it. So the more you listen to a variety of music, and of course I encourage you to, listen to worship music and all the great Christian music that's out there. But I also encourage you to go beyond that, because there's been all kinds of music in the history of the world that God has created through men. Classical music, jazz music, ragtime music, rock and roll music, chanting, Gregorian chants. I mean, it's all God's idea. Man gets creative and creates a different style with it. But don't limit yourself and go, I'm only a worship musician. Anybody who's praising God is a worship musician. I mean, in other words, it's more like a posture of your heart, meaning I play all kinds of music. I play rock and roll, I play jazz, I play funk, I play fusion, I play Latin, I play worship music, whatever. It's all just music to me. I am the worshiper, so whatever music I'm playing, I'm worshiping God. It isn't the style of music that's worshiping God. It's me, the person, the human being that God's playing through. So I don't get all religious. And I've had a lot of people over my career ask me this in different interviews. They would say, well, if you're a Christian, how come you're playing with these worldly secular people? That you couldn't be a Christian if you're playing with Frankie Valli and the Four Seasons from Jersey Boys. You couldn't be a Christian if you're playing with Lenny Kravitz. First of all, Lenny Kravitz is a Christian, and that people don't know that. But the other thing is, like, I would ask them, okay, so what do you do for a living? And they'll go, oh, I'm a plumber. And I go, oh, okay. So do you only fix Christian toilets, or do you just fix any toilet that's broken? Because if you're a Christian plumber, you shouldn't be in any house of a person who's not a believer. You shouldn't be in any secular home. You should screen all your calls and say, you have toilet problems? Hey, are you a Christian, by the way? Because I can't unclog it unless you are. So that's to be so limiting that you go, no, I'm a musician. I play music with people that hire me. I bring the light wherever I go to people who might not know it because I'm available and because I'm open, and I don't judge them and I don't condemn them. I'm a worship musician no matter what I'm playing. So I'm representing God wherever I go. By the way, most Christians don't need another God representative. It's all the people who don't know God who need another representative to, and so I've traveled all around the world, met gazillions of people from every walk of life, the richest in the world, the poorest in the world. It don't matter to me. They're all people. They all need the Lord. They're all the same in his eyes. Not one is not better than the other. And me as a worship musician, if my heart is open, I can reach people because I haven't put that religious cloak over myself that goes, I don't play anything that's not a Christian song. Classical music doesn't even have lyrics. So how do you know if it's classical music is Christian or not Christian? Johann Sebastian Bach had a quote. He said, the end result of all music should be to the glory of God. Most of the great classical composers, perfect people, because if you study out their lives, they were sinners just like everybody else in the world. But they had a heart of worship towards God, and they acknowledged God was the giver of this great gift. Beethoven, all these people acknowledge that this supernatural God is who's given me this ability. And they created the music they created. They were worshiping God with those classical pieces, just like you would with a song that you're going to say Jesus, Jesus, Jesus over and over. That's how they worship God. Was like, I'm going to write this music and I'm going to give it to the glory of God. Don't look too deeply in people's lives or you'll get disappointed because everyone has fallen short of the glory of God. If you look in the life of any great, including Christian artists and people, you look in their life, you're going to find some imperfection. You're going to find some sin. You're going to find some things where they have fallen. Don't be too quick to condemn and judge them because the same thing may happen to you or has happened to you or will happen to you. In other words, we will stumble. We will be imperfect. We will never attain this perfection. And so when you start judging other people and go, well, I can't listen to him because we can't negate somebody's work because they made a mistake in their life somewhere. God still put that creative gift in them, and it still might inspire me, even though they maybe fell off the wagon. So we have to keep our heart to where we love people, and we have this great gift of music that really unites people. It's a super powerful. It's actually, I think, it's the most powerful thing on the earth, really, besides the Holy Spirit. It's this invisible power. If you look at a concert and you see how people become overtaken by emotions with music, sports doesn't do that. Movies don't do that. Books and paintings don't do that. Music speaks to the deepest recesses of your soul that, again, where words can't even comprehend. A great worship song can get you out of a totally bad funk. You could go, oh man, I'm going through the worst time. A song will just ignite something in you, and all of a sudden hope will arise again. And no other art form has that ability. And you might relate to this too. It's like you can remember where you've heard certain songs when you first heard them, and you go, oh gosh, I totally remember. This is when I used to live at this place where I was driving around in my mom's car and this Lincoln Brewster song came on. Songs put a timeline stamp on your life. You totally remember. You could visually see where you're at. I could watch a movie right now and 6 months from now, I'll get 20 minutes through the movie and go, I think I've seen this, but I don't know conclusively. And then I'm almost to the end of it. That's right. I saw this. I know how it ends. But songs are different, man. They make an imprint and you never forget. You never forget where you're at. You never forget what it felt like. It is a very powerful, supernatural thing that you've been given, this ability to play music. So take it seriously in the fact that it can really touch and change lives. Whenever I've been in low seasons of my life of heartbreak, disappointment, sadness, depression, rejection, and I've experienced all of them like everybody else on the planet, music is what always got me out of it. Either some Christian worship song that just had an anointing on it, or some secular song that had an anointing on it. They just didn't know God. And here's the thing, God has given everybody who can play music, all of their abilities came from God. It's just some people don't know that. The people who don't know God don't know that the music is God's gift to them. The Beatles would be an example. They're not a Christian band, but God anointed these guys with an ability to write songs. and gave them, and same with so many other talented people. Now, the difference of a Christian and a non-Christian is a Christian would go, that was a gift directly from God. A secular person just might not know it. Or some of them might say, it comes from another place or it's otherworldly or whatever. A lot of them do acknowledge that it's a supernatural thing. They just don't know Jesus. But God doesn't take the gift away from them because they don't know him, because he's hoping they will know him before they die. He's hoping they will come to him. And if people like us don't reach them, they'll never know him. And we're not going to reach them if we go, I can't play drums with you because I'm a Christian drummer and you're a heathen. And I can't fix your toilet because you're just going to have a smelly house because I'm a Christian plumber and I could only fix your toilet if you were a Christian. It's ignorant, it's shallow, it's judgmental, it's not the love of God. The love of God reaches into the hearts of all men, and he uses people like us who are willing to be those vessels of his light. And music for me has always just been a conduit, a tool to reach other people in which I could minister to them personally. I'll tell you an interesting story. I was teaching at a college in Nashville called Belmont University. And Belmont is a very well-known school. It's got a very famous music department. And I was a professor there for 9 years while I still traveled around the world and played and recorded and spoke. But anyway, there was a big drum convention that was coming up, and I wanted to invite a bunch of my students to it. And they had never been to it. It's a yearly conference called PAS, which stands for Percussive Arts Society. So it's like a yearly drum convention where all the world's greatest drummers come to the convention for 3 or 4 days, and then they teach master classes. And I've taught at it and done clinics. And so we all would teach different master classes. It could be a guy teaching you how to play a timpani. It could be a marching, drumline guy. It could be a drum set guy. But it's the whole world of percussion. 4 days of immense education and inspiration and performances. And then they have all the instruments. They show all the drums and the cymbals, and all the companies are selling their gear and, and all that. Most of my students had never heard of it and never been to it. So I said, I'm going to get a big van and I'm going to gather up all my students, and we're going to the PAS conference for 4 days. So they all signed up for it. Now, there was a performance. There was a famous jazz group. You guys probably never heard of it, but that's okay. You could look it up. They're called Weather Report. That's the name. They're a legendary jazz fusion group that really changed music history. So anyway, Weather Report had a number of famous drummers through the years. And so there was this clinic where they were going to feature two of the different drummers from Weather Report that were going to talk about their work with the band and the different seasons they were in. They're both going to play. Both friends of mine, both world-renowned drummers. One of them is a super on fire Christian and has been for years. The other one is a secular guy, super lovely guy, immense player, but doesn't know the Lord. So they both play and they do their thing. The one, and then this is my students commenting to me afterwards. So what did you think of these two guys? I said, man, they were both amazing. But when so-and-so played, God, it really hit me. So the so-and-so was the guy who was a Christian. Now this guy has been filled with the anointing and presence of God as long as I've known him, for years. Even before me, he's older than me. So when you have the presence of God in you when you play and you're surrendered to him, what happens is people begin to feel God in you when you play, because he's actually playing through you if you're allowing him to. And so my students were all basically saying, without saying it, that there was something more present about this guy. There was some bright light that touched my soul in a way. The other guy is a great drummer, legendary, but he's very cerebral. He's very intellectual. He doesn't feel things in the spirit the way the other guy does, because the other guy knew Jesus personally in a very in-depth way and has this joy of the Lord when he plays. So that dude touched so many people, but they couldn't put their finger on it. Fast forward a few years later, I'm playing at a big international drum festival that's being recorded on video. It's called the Modern Drummer Festival. And it's like the most prestigious drum festival in the world, and every drummer dreams of playing it. And they also film it for a DVD release. So I'd always wanted to play it, and I was invited to play it. And I prayed before the presentation. I said, Lord, when I play, let me feel you so powerfully that come out in every note, so that when the people are hearing it, that and drumming is music is spiritual. It's a warfare thing. You guys might not even really have really studied that to that depth. But when I play my drums, demons are shrieking, demons are frightened. Fear goes. It's a supernatural release of God's power, right? So that's why God always sent the worshipers up front in the battle, because if He had the people worshiping, it brought in angels and pushed back demons. It is a supernatural warfare instrument, all of our instruments, when you're playing for God. So I prayed and I said, Lord, when I play, I command that every note that goes out will touch somebody's heart. For some person, it'll be healing. For some person, it'll be vision, restoration. But I believe that every note is going to do something. Every person who's going to hear it live, and when it's on video and it goes out to hundreds of thousands of people and played on the internet, that it's going to touch people. And this drummer also was on this festival. This other drummer I told you about, the Christian guy who played with Weather Report, he was there. And I said, hey, Alex, man, let's pray before we play, man. And we had this powerful prayer, that when we played, that God would really play through. Now, a year later, the DVD came out, and it featured a variety of different great drummers from different great backgrounds, right? So not everybody knew every drummer, right? If you were a fan of the group Tool, maybe you bought it for that guy. If you're a fan of, the Beatles, you bought it because Ringo was on it. If you're a fan of Michael Jackson, you bought it because I played with him once, so whatever. Different drummers buy it for different reasons, right? So there was a bunch of people that bought it because I was on it, but then there was a bunch of people who bought it who didn't really know me that well. They were introduced to me in that video. So I started to get all kinds of emails from people, drummers from around the world that I never met or heard of or didn't know. And they'd say, hey, I bought the Modern Drummer Festival, but I'm a big Neil Peart fan from Rush, and I bought it because Neil was on there. But I watched your performance because I watched all of them. And they said, man, I don't know what it was, but when I watched your performance, like, it really hit me. Like, I found myself like almost tearing up. Like, they're describing what I had prayed that would happen. That through my playing, God would touch people in a way that they don't even understand what happened, because His Spirit was in my spirit when I'm playing. And that thing that touches them will break down a wall, and then they'll go up and look me up on my website, or they'll look me up on the internet. And then all of a sudden they'll find sermons of me speaking and preaching, and they'll see all the Christian articles I've written and all my devotionals, and they'll go, I wonder if that's what it was, because this guy is cut out of a different cloth. He's not your rock and roll dude talking about sex, drugs, rock and roll, and partying. He's talking about God. Maybe that's what I felt. So we have this great opportunity when we play our instruments to literally change the lives of anybody who's hearing us. And you cannot measure it because it's unseeable. Just like love, seeable, but it's not unknowable. You might not be able to physically see it, but when you're loved or when you're being abused. Every person in the world knows the difference, right? When you're being loved, it's this invisible force that you feel, and it changes your life. Well, music is an invisible, supernatural force from God that literally penetrates the souls of mankind, and you can't physically see it. So never take it for granted, and always go, hey, every time I play. But see, I always invoke the Holy Spirit. I always ask God when I play. I look at it this way. I play an instrument, right? You play an instrument. But I look at it a different way. I go, I am the instrument, and now I'm asking you, Lord, to play me. Play through me. I am the instrument, meaning I'm the human vessel, your instrument. I have studied my instrument for years so I can have a skill level, like David was skillful. The Bible says David was skillful on his instrument. That means he wasn't a hack. That means he practiced. That means he developed, he did his thing so that he could be excellent. You cannot honor God with mediocrity and laziness and complacency and apathy and indifference. You honor him with hard work, with excellence, with conviction of the heart, with purpose, with destiny, with your blood, sweat, and tears. That's how you honor him. And then the key is, once you become great at what you do or super highly skilled, then the most important part is the hardest part for most people, is you walk with humility. Because human nature is, once you've accomplished something on a really high level, you become very arrogant and self-centered, and then therefore you're useless to God. An example would be when I watched the Olympics, which you might have the last time. I can't remember if it was the last time, but the world's fastest runner, what's his name, Usain Bolt. But when I saw him on the interviews after he talked, this dude was so cocky and so arrogant. It just fully turned me off. And I was like, you know, what would have been more beautiful is if that guy were the world's best, but he was humble. Because if he was humble, he would have touched so many more people, so many more people. He would have endeared so many more people to him. But when you walk around like you're the greatest thing in the world, even if you are, he forgets that the only reason he could be the world's fastest runner is God has already given him an athletic gift. Now, he worked really, really hard to develop it, but he never gave credit to the creator because God didn't make everybody fast. You know what I mean? He made some people as slow as a sloth, you know, and those people have a different skill and a different gift, right? But the importance is once you reach a high level of skill and excellence, then do the opposite of what the world does and walk in humility. Because when you walk in humility, you allow God to continue to use you and you acknowledge the source of your talent to begin with, which is true. It's from Him. You didn't give yourself the talent. Then you're able to reach and touch and inspire many more people. And at the end of your life, or at the end of my life, my only goal is to touch as many people as humanly possible with my life, my gifts, my talents, my platform, the opportunities I had. And I can do that everywhere I go, every single day, based on how I carry myself, the attitude I carry myself with, the skill that I develop. People will always, excellence always demands an audience and gains the respect of the earth. When you're excellent at something, the world will come knocking at your door for your product. Now, the question is, do you glorify God from that point? And are you able to be used by God? Because our instruments are just a tool. He's given other people different tools. And he's given people medical tools and accounting tools and you know, whatever your gift is, it's just a tool. Ours is just music. But at the end, he will still ask you what you did with that tool. And ultimately, how much fruit did you grow and who benefited from it? And that's the whole thing. So I want to encourage you to study, to continue to study at the Thrive Arts Academy, do what your teachers ask you to do, come back and be even better than they expected. I remember every lesson when my teachers would give me the lesson, they'd say, I want you to do this. I'd come back with that thing like I wanted to go on and beyond what they asked of me. They're like, wow, man, you're the only student. Not only did you learn it, but you came back and killed it above what I expected. Um, and I still maintain that same attitude today. I'm working on my memoir right now. I'm in the final stages of something that's taken me really all of my life to write and literally the last 10 years of investing in it. But when I work with different editors, I'll send a chapter to the editor and he'll go, this is awesome. Da, da, da. But I need you to go deeper here. I need you to make me feel something. And it'd be really hard when he asks me, like, how do you do that? Like, and I'll read and I'll study books and I'll read other memoirs and I'll come back and I'll send him the chapter and he'll go, you far surpassed what I was expecting you to do. He goes, I couldn't have done it better myself. I'm not saying that in a braggadocious way. I'm saying that we're capable of that. All of us are capable of knocking it out of the ballpark if we want to. And I wanted to honor him because he was gifting me his time and goes, I love your story. I just want to help you. So every time you get a chapter you think is done, send it to me and I'll critique it. Now, this guy's written all kinds of New York Times best-selling books, so he knows what he's talking about. He's a great, prolific writer and storyteller, and I valued his opinion. He's given me his time. I go, I want to honor him by not being a hack and giving him something that took me not very long to do. I want to put all my heart, and then he goes, you have been one of the best writing students I've ever had. Now, all of us here are creative, so we're not limited to just our musical instrument. Usually when God makes you a sort of a creative person, it really goes in, like me, it's music, writing, it's teaching, it's speaking. These are all creative art forms. I have worked just as hard on each one to try to raise it up to the same level as the drumming. It's taken me all my life, and I'm still working on it. But it was all free from God. So I don't get any credit because I had talent. Everybody in the world has talent. You get credit because other people were blessed by your talent, and other people prospered by your talent, and other people were inspired by your talent or by meeting you one on one. That's where you get reward from God. Because how's he going to reward you when the initial? It's kind of like if you're the son of Bill Gates, right? You know, and you make $1 million. Well, how hard was that? Bill Gates was your dad. You started off with a big bank account. All you did was invest whatever he gave you. And now you're like some big hot shot. Yeah, I turned $10 million into $100 million. Yeah, but you had $10 million and it was given to you for free. So how hard is that? That's the same thing with God. Yeah, I became really the world's greatest athlete or whatever, Well, your dad gave you this free gift. So get off your high horse. It was free. He already gave it to you. What are you doing? Like, you started off with already 10 million in the bank. So shut up and be thankful and grateful and help a bunch of other people along the way. And that's it. You know, shut your pie hole and be humble.
Zoro,
Because
that's awesome, man. All of that, the posture of the heart, the power of music, hard work and hard work ethic. We want to give a couple minutes here if students
yeah,
have any questions or if teachers have any questions, just to kind of interact with you.
this is good. It's a perfect time to do it. I'm open.
And yeah, while you're thinking of your questions, students and volunteers, Zoro's websites, the link is in the chat stream there. All of his books are available there. I think you have video on all of some of your talks and things like that too, that you can go and check out there and be encouraged and equipped there as well. But if anyone's got any questions, we'll open the floor for a bit and let you guys talk to them.
I can get us rolling if nobody.
Okay, go ahead, Allison.
Urgent. I had two things that I thought of while you were talking. You talked a little bit about practicing, but maybe a little bit more like in a tangible way. If you could talk through how to push through times when you just really don't want to practice, because I think that can be a challenge, especially like at the younger age when you're still kind of settling in musically. I know I went through it before music really clicked for me. I've definitely gone through seasons where practicing like wasn't fun and it was kind of always a chore. But have you had times in your life where you've had to kind of like, I guess, fight your way through that? And how did you do that?
Absolutely, and still do. It has never been, practicing is a kind of a thing that, like, I think every human being feels that way. What did Muhammad Ali said something like, Charles Barkley, a famous basketball player, said, I hated absolutely every moment of my practice. And yet he's one of the greatest in the world. You go, wow. He goes, but I did. And Arnold Schwarzenegger said, he goes, I hated every second in the gym, but I trained myself, the very thing that I hated, I trained my mind to embrace what I hated. In other words, he mentally flipped it around. Like, I mean, if any of you have ever done any physical exercise, when I go to the gym, I absolutely hate push-ups. That's probably the thing I hate. I just hate that feeling of push-ups. I mean, who likes any exercise, right? It just doesn't feel good, right? It's painful. It's like, well, why would you like something that like hurts in your muscles? Like the other day, I hadn't worked on my legs in a long time, and I just worked on my legs. All of a sudden, I'm walking around like super stiff, because like you haven't worked that muscle. It's not fun. These things are just choices. They're just a discipline. Now, there are times if I feel totally uninspired. What inspires me to get back to practicing at all is when I'll either read something inspirational about some musician or whatever, some creative. I'll watch some documentary that inspires me or some concert. So I'm always trying to flood my mind and my heart with things that inspire me, because then that gets me to go, okay, I got to get back. I'll see somebody really great at something, go, yeah, I got to get back to practicing. So sometimes I'll mentally, strategically do, and basically you're going to be inspired by either what you watch, what you read, or what you listen to. Those are the channels of where inspiration comes. That's the only way information comes to us. Something I watch, something I read, or something I hear. So this is why I have so many CDs, so many books, so much data and information. Because if I'm feeling kind of like uninspired, I go, hey, watch that. And then it makes me want to go and practice. And then other times nothing inspires me, and it will just be a choice. It will just be a chore. Now, if any of you older people here have worked out, you hate going to the gym when you work out, but when you're done, you never leave going, I wish I didn't do that. I've never ever left the gym going, I wish I didn't work out. I hated it the whole time I was there, and I didn't dig, when you get that burning feeling in your chest from cardio, and I can't say I like that feeling, but I always left going, glad I did that. You know what I mean? And I leave every practice session going, I'm glad I did it, even if I was hating doing it. So some things in life are just a choice, and just training yourself to be disciplined. and let's say you discipline yourself 7 days a week, you decide I'm going to practice for an hour a day. Out of those 7 hours, maybe 4 of them are inspired while you're practicing. Once I get into it and I'm there, then you can begin to enjoy it. You have to push through that resistance of like, oh, do I want to? It's like waking up in the morning. You set your alarm clock for 6:30. Oh, do I want to do that? And then you just push yourself through and you get up. And then once you're up and you're doing stuff and you go, oh, I'm glad I got up, because if I would have wasted an hour, I was so So you just, the thing about human beings that we have that are different than any other creature, he's given us will. He's given us self-will. People have willed themselves to live through famines. People have willed themselves to live through the Holocaust. People have willed themselves to live through being stuck on a dinghy for 40 days out in the Pacific Ocean. The human will is powerful. We just have to exercise it. So
great. So then making the choice and filling your mind with stuff that's inspirational. I would add to that, if I could, just surrounding yourself with people that will encourage you that way. I remember we were in a rehearsal with Lincoln, and you of all people were complaining about you hadn't had time to practice. And I was thinking, gosh, if anyone could lay off the practice for a little bit, it's Zoro. But then you were going home to practice, rededicating yourself to practice. And I left inspired going, I'm going to go home and practice now. Anyway, we might have time for one more question. Anyone else have one more question before we wrap up here?
What you said is good. Like, we all inspire each other. It's key who you hang out with, because
If no one else does, I had another one.
Go ahead, Allison.
Good.
Yeah, go for it.
Well, maybe if we get some.
It's kind of freezing up on me for a second.
But maybe if you could direct. Oh, sorry, can you guys hear me okay now?
I lost what you were saying. Try it again.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can. Let's see if I can continue hearing you. Go ahead.
Just recommendations. I know you probably have a lot.
Recommendations for what? You cut off in the beginning.
I'll write it in the chats.
I was just gonna say that's probably a good idea. I was hearing you perfectly before, and then all of a sudden, okay, artist recommendations as far as what? When you say artist recommendations. Oh, for students to listen to. And when you say artists, like of any style, of all music, or of worship music, or of what? Oh yeah, well that's a broad question. I would say, I mean, there's greats in every style of music, right? I mean, you know what? I would watch some documentaries. There's a lot of great documentaries on Netflix about music, about the history of music. There's when you watch all these documentaries about music history, that's where you're going to learn. Oh, who are the Beach Boys, or who was Earth, Wind and Fire, or who was Stan Getz, or who was John Coltrane? Like, you'll hear names, and this is something that's happened to me in my whole developmental years from the beginning to now. I'll read something inspiring, and maybe I only know 50% of the people they're talking about. The other 50%, I'll go, I have to check out who they're talking about. I don't know who that guy is. And then I'll go Google it or listen to some music. So begin with the first thing you don't know. Like, oh, I've never heard of this band, or I don't know who these people were, I don't know who Mahalia Jackson was. So Mahalia Jackson was like a very famous Black gospel singer who really, and then another one, Rosetta Sharp. All these people, you learn the history of all the different musics. Like, there's a history of gospel music that eventually led into worship music. There's a history of jazz music. There's a history of pop music. There's a history of rock music. And there are people that are would be considered the greats in those genres. Learn who Frank Sinatra is, and learn who the Beatles were, and learn who Beethoven, Bach, and Mozart are, and not just their names that you've heard, but go listen to their music, and go listen to, Scott Joplin. Expose yourself to all, but a lot of how you can find out about that especially today, is by watching a documentary, because in the documentary they're going to talk about all these people, and every single one you're going to go, I don't know who they are. I don't know anything about what they're talking about. Then you go listen to it. You guys have it really easy, because when I started doing this, like I would read jazz magazines, and the drummer would be talking about some other great jazz guy from the 20s, and there was no YouTube, and there was no so to go find out who that guy he was talking about, I'd have to dig hard and long and deep to find a record by the guy he was referencing, which is from decades earlier, because I wanted to know what he was talking about. Because when he said, "Oh, it's the way that guy played his roles or the way he played his patterns," and I'm like, "What does that sound like?" I'm just reading about it, and I want to know what he sounds like. And so I'd go to the library. Do you have any albums from Baby Dodds? Do you have an article or book? No, no, we don't. And I go to a jazz record store. Have you heard of them? Oh yeah, but we don't have anything by him. You know, it was an exploratory mission to understand who they were talking about, but it came from reading stuff. So read. There's, you go to Barnes and Noble right now. There's books on the history of music. You know, buy a book on the history of music, and then go and learn about the history of music, and then your ear will forever be different, and you will be able to add things into your playing in a worship setting that come from other places, that now make it deeper and more rich and more vibrant, because you're not a one-dimensional horse. You're somebody whose ears, they say what makes a great musician is to have big ears like Dumbo, right? Dumbo had giant ears. Big ears means you've listened to all kinds of music, and now when you're creating a song for God, your influences are coming from everywhere. And big ears means, man, I hear where he's going, I know what he's doing. Last story I'll share with you, and this is along the lines of that. uh, I traveled with a guy named Paul Allen. Most of you don't know that name, but Paul Allen was the co-founder of Microsoft, which you do know that name. He and Bill Gates invented Microsoft. Paul Allen was the fourth richest guy on planet Earth, period. Below him was, you know, above him were three other guys. One of them was his buddy Bill Gates. He was the fourth richest guy in the world. Paul was a super creative type. He was a genius. I traveled on his $240 million yacht called the Octopus. But Paul was a super passionate guy. He loved music. He was creative in the computer stuff, but he loved guitar and he loved writing songs. And anyway, long story short, I was invited to travel with him on his Octopus. And on his $240 million yacht, which was the most expensive yacht in the world, he had a recording studio. He had a state-of-the-art recording studio that was insane. It was, and we traveled around the world in the South Pacific, looking at these amazing islands while recording music. Paul knew all kinds of music. He had the biggest record collection of anybody I knew, even more than me. He had the biggest collection of music and knew all kinds of music. He was a fan of everything. And when we were on his Octopus, he said to me once, he goes, what do you want to watch, Zara? What do you want to watch? Like he would always say, like, what music concerts or video, you know, like, because he had this enormous collection of stuff. So he always wanted to see if I could stump him on something. I said, he goes, just name anything. What do you mean anything? Like, he goes, no, just name anything, any artist, any era. Like, what do you? I said, all right, like, got anything from Frank Sinatra, 1957? You know, when he did that Australia show. He's like, gets on his computer, bam, he has it. He had been collecting every kind of music documentary, series, concert, and he's Paul Allen. He's the co-founder of Microsoft, so he's got the mainframe, the hard drive to have anything he wants collected, right? And so we would just sit there and be like, music, rock school, like, let's just watch a Frank Sinatra concert. All right, well, let's watch this Police concert, or let's watch this U2 thing. And then when we would go down to his studio to create music, he would say, he goes, yeah. So what do you want to do, Paul? He goes, no, I'm doing this thing. It's like, I got this idea. It's kind of like a Alexander Desplat, a John Barry thing. You know, and he'd named these movie film score composer guys. And I knew exactly who he was talking about and what kind of vibe he wanted, because I'm a big, huge soundtrack movie score guy. There wasn't any style that he picked out that I couldn't track with him and follow what he wanted to do, because I had listened to a vast amount of music in my life, of every kind of music and genre. I became super invaluable to him, because he said that a lot of the other great drummers that he had ever hired or brought, they couldn't go in very many directions. They're always very one-dimensional. But anywhere he went and had an idea, I had a reference point, because I was already a fan of all that music. So that made me super valuable to him, and we became friends through this bonding of this unique music, and the Lord used me to be sort of a vessel of light to him, but all because I had big ears. I had Dumbo ears, meaning when we're playing, you're playing spontaneously, and somebody's going to do a riff that's from a style of music that you don't know. Well, you wouldn't even know what to do with that. Have you never heard it? Because you can't respond to something. It's like you're with somebody, and all of a sudden they break out into French accent or a Russian accent, or they give you a word of German. And what if you knew them all? Bam, you could track with them. You could go where they're going because they're spontaneous. It's the same way with comedians. It's the same way with actors. If you have a vast background of stuff that you've studied, then when you're doing a scene and when you're doing a comedy thing, things aren't funny if you can't even reference what they're talking about. Jokes are funny because you relate to what they're saying. But if you're one dimensional and half the things he's saying, you don't even know what he's saying, they're not funny to you. So everything is about importing more in your head and learning more. And that's all those things inspire me. And then they make me want to grow. And then they make me more valuable when I'm playing with people because I have more things to draw from. There's so much
So,
inspiration out there. We should never be bored.
so good, man. So good, Zoro. Just amazing stuff. I feel like like you were talking before, we could keep going and going and going. Can we all thank Zoro? Awesome.
Thank you guys for being the early morning. What's that saying? The early bird gets the worm.
Yeah.
You guys got some nuggets, hopefully, of truth and inspiration. I promise you, if you even apply 10% of what I said, you walk away with 10% of what I said and do one of those things. All you got to do is just go, what do I remember most of what he said? And do that. If you do that one thing, it'll make a huge difference in your life. Because sometimes we don't retain everything. But when I would walk away from something like this, I'd go, what one thing do I want to do that he said? And then I would do it and I would grow from it.
We're all
So
gonna leave in we're all gonna leave in practice, man. That's all of us are gonna do.
I'm going to
Anyway,
do the same thing. I
so
inspired myself.
obviously Zoro's super knowledgeable about music and using his gifts for the kingdom. The other thing that Zoro's great at is he is an amazing prayer warrior. So if I could ask you, Zoro, to close us in prayer, to pray for our students and their parents and families, to pray for our volunteers, and to pray for our staff at Thrive Arts, kind of be awesome, man, to close that way.
Absolutely. And thank you for inviting me. And I want to thank all you guys for coming. And I want to thank you guys for first of all, studying at the Thrive Arts Academy, for your volunteers like Mark and Devin. I always see you guys always playing, at Adventure and support and wherever you guys are playing, and Seth, just, whatever you guys are always doing. Thank you for that. You got some great teachers with great hearts at Thrive Arts Academy. So thank you for supporting that and just being hungry enough to learn. And then thank you guys for just giving me the opportunity to share my heart. This is what I live to do, is inspire people. And music and speaking and talking and writing, it's all got one goal: to inspire people. So go out and do the same with whatever you have. It's just about inspiring people. That's it. And so, Lord, we just thank you for this morning. I thank you for the people that came, including, all the teachers and Brandon and everybody. And Lord, I just pray that something I said would touch them deeply in a way that would affect them for the rest of their life, that it wouldn't be just another guy speaking, another Zoom conference call, another meeting, another whatever, but there would literally be some nuggets from heaven that would just be etched in their heart that they would never be able to get out or want to get out, that it would change and make a shift in their life and go. And when we get to heaven, we'll get to see what it was, and I'll never know what it is, but may it be something that really changed their trajectory, their visions, their dreams, their commitment, their dedication. And Lord, may they be inspired to be who you made them to be. Lord, I'm just sharing what you did in my life. I'm just one insignificant soul, but I've done my best to be all that you've made me to be. May they just do that. May they just do their best to be who you made them to be. May they be passionate about reaching their potential. May they adopt discipline and conviction in their life to do things sometimes when you don't feel like doing them. The right thing, reading your Bible, pursuing God, practicing. There are many things we don't want to do, but may they rise up with a conviction of their heart to go, I'm going to do this anyway. And may you give them the tools they need. Continue to place other great teachers, leaders, mentors around them at all stages and at all ages. We all need that. There's nobody who's exempt from needing to be inspired. and educated on a higher level. So I pray for that, and I pray for the opportunities for them to use their gifts in a way that would glorify you. I pray for the parents, those that are supporting their children, spending their hard-earned money to help them grow. And not everyone, Lord, will become the next, world's greatest singer, whatever. That's not what's important. What's important is that they become everything they're supposed to be, and that in the process they find the joy of creating, the joy of living, and the joy of serving you. And may they ultimately fulfill your purpose for their life, whether music's just for a season or and it's to keep them out of trouble, whatever it is, Lord. May it be something super positive, and may they use it in a supernatural warfare kind of way. May nobody on this call ever look at their instrument the same way and realize every time I play, I'm summoning angels and I'm squelching out demons because it's the Lord who plays with me. And that's the power of praise, whether it's instrumental or vocal. It's the heart of the worshiper. So I speak blessing over everybody here, whatever their needs are, whether they're physical, financial, relational, emotional, or spiritual. And I pray a special extra blessing for Kayla and Allison being new moms, Lord. May you just help them on their journey. It is a wonderful, beautiful journey. Also a very difficult, arduous one, Lord, of just work emotionally and physically. And so may you just inspire them and lift them up and help them to be all the mothers they desire to be. And may I speak generational blessings over their children and the next ones that are coming, and speak to the generations that they will all be God-serving, God-loving children that will be difference makers in this world. I pray for all the marriages represented here, that you would bless them with longevity and prosperity of purpose, of passion, of power. And we just release all this. We bind hell and rebuke hell from any assignment on any of us, and we release heaven and the plans of heaven over all of us. In Jesus' mighty name, amen.
Amen. Thanks again, Zoro.
Thank you, guys.
Amazing,
You guys have
amazing.
an awesome Saturday. We got cameras on everybody now. We're going to see who's practicing today.
We'll
Hey.
see you, students. Good seeing you, students and volunteers. Mark, good seeing you again, man.